Happy Saturday, y'all. Josh's Severe Weather. We are going to talk a little bit about today's severe weather expected in the east, but a lot of this video is going to focus on what to expect next week. And we do have some drastic changes coming in the weather after such a warm end to the week in the central and eastern U.S. Next week, not going to look that way at all. Actually, it's going to be a lot cooler and wetter with less severe weather, fortunately, for those of us that have need to catch our breath from all the severe weather we've had here in the last month or so. Let me share my screen with you all and kind of show you what things are going to look like. And what we're going to see is a southern storm track, which is going to allow colder air to come down into the central and eastern U.S. It's already worked its way down in the central U.S., but no big warm-ups coming anytime soon for about 3/4 of the country. Now, down in South Florida, it'll still be pretty mild this time of the year. Nothing, really unusual for you. But the West Coast is actually going to warm up, and that obviously could be problematic with all the snow we had in the Sierra Nevada and in the mountains of the West, because we're going to see a very rapid snow melt. There will be flooding problems in the West. So while we see that warmer weather, it doesn't mean we're not going to have some significant weather that's going to impact the safety of folks. So anyway, we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Yesterday, we did have just a little bit of severe weather, some pretty big hail down in deep South Texas. A few reports of funnel clouds coming onshore in the Fort Lauderdale area. Once again, it seems like it's been very busy down there the last couple weeks. And some isolated severe weather from Mississippi up into Ohio, but nothing really too organized. And fortunately, no fatalities out of these storms. Now, the map right now does not look extremely busy. We do have some freeze watches and warnings over the mid part of the country, some flash flood watches with the snow melt across the northern tier of the country. And we do have a special weather statement in eastern North Carolina. We actually have a pretty big wildfire burning in Craven County, impacting a lot of air quality there. I do expect, though, we're going to see things picking up here as our trough begins to swing south and east and becomes more negatively tilted. You can see on the water vapor a pretty strong trough over Minnesota and Iowa. That's going to dig southeast and allow this moisture to come up the East Coast today with a cold front. Multiple rounds of rain and storms expected right on through this evening. There is the threat for some severe weather. I don't think we're looking at a widespread tornado outbreak, but I do think we could have some damaging winds anywhere from really the Carolinas on up into Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York State later today into tonight. And there's been a little bit of severe weather already this morning in the north part of Charlotte, North Carolina. Nothing that looks like it's extremely damaging from what I could tell, but certainly the kind of storms that'll wake you up if you're trying to sleep in this morning or you're trying to get out to Lake Norman and do some fishing. Not safe to do that. So we definitely are already getting the day started with some unsettled weather. We have a slight risk for severe weather from the eastern half of South Carolina right on up to about Philadelphia, York, Reading, Pennsylvania, and into the Delmarva Peninsula. I will break this down for you guys. We'll start with the threat for hail, which, because it's going to become more unstable this afternoon, there is somewhat of a concern that there will be some hailstones falling from just east of Charleston right on up to Myrtle Beach, Florence, Fayetteville, Raleigh, even up to about Richmond and all the way to the coast here this evening. The tornado chances actually extend a little bit higher or a little bit farther to the north, but not a high chance for tornadoes, only about a 2%. So what that means is we're probably going to be looking at severe thunderstorm watches and not tornado watches this afternoon. However, 2% still means there is some potential for a few tornadoes in this region, just not going to be a huge outbreak. So really, in my opinion, I think it's most likely going to be east of Raleigh and east of Fayetteville, right on up into Virginia, and in particular into Maryland, that we have to be most concerned with the threat for a tornado. But possibly even into Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So really anybody in this area needs to be on the alert and have multiple ways of receiving warnings here today into this evening. Also severe wind as we have this trough lifting northward and winds aloft increasing. There could be some widespread wind damage, especially if we get an organized squall line going and moving eastward. And the certainty of that is not super high, but certainly that risk is there. So this is a 15% chance that we do have a wind gust that gets over 58 miles per hour within this area. So there's definitely a chance for that. Also, we have a slight risk for severe weather late this afternoon, especially tonight over central Texas. In the Austin area, just north of San Antonio into the hill country of Texas, we could see some pretty big hail across this region. In fact, a significant 10% risk here for large hail as a disturbance comes out of the Mexican Sierra Madre and brings some instability with it. There'll be a little bit more heating of the day in here, so there will definitely be a threat for some hail. A small chance for a tornado in this region as well, and kind of a 5% chance of wind that could be severe. But I think we're going to see more supercell type storms in here rather than an organized squall line. So large hail would be the greatest concern. Now let's look east first, because that's where probably many of you are watching from, I would guess. And not a lot has changed from yesterday's video, so I'm not going to go into too much detail like I did. I think most of this video is going to look at next week, but you can see here's the level of instability. This is what's called the CAPE, convective available potential energy. And it's marginal for some severe weather today up until about lunchtime, but then increases this afternoon, especially in South Carolina. And this would be what can fuel some hail potentially in this region. You can see those numbers do come up into the Philly area to about 1,500 joules per kilogram. And that certainly is enough instability to sustain a stronger updraft, which can keep those thunderstorms going and keep them intense. But it's really only going to be a small window, just a few hours of potential severe weather, and then things are already quieting down as we head into the evening. The risk for a strong tornado is not high at all, but there is some chance for a tornado. The parameters here start to climb. This factors in wind shear in the lowest 6 kilometers of the atmosphere, and you can see there is somewhat of a risk here across the Delmarva, Delaware River Valley. It's not super high, but we're not talking high-end tornadoes. There could be a tornado or two, though, and that's really all I want you guys to be prepared for. And this is up to about 7 o'clock Eastern time. I think the Philly area certainly has to watch out, and we also have to keep an eye on things in North Carolina. But as we head into the overnight, things do quickly die off. So this is going to be a fairly brief threat. We are going to see multiple lines of storms moving through the Carolinas and Virginia here. Kind of the first one's already gotten going in the Charlotte area. That's going to move east and weaken some. But with the heating of the day, should start to expand eastward. We could see a few discrete cells ahead of this, and those are the ones you have to keep an eye on for tornadoes. Really anywhere from near Raleigh and Chapel Hill and Durham on up to about Baltimore here, about 2 this afternoon. And then a line behind it as well could produce some strong wind gusts with it as it moves through parts of the Carolinas. So you kind of have 2 parts of this line. Here's part number 1, and it really ramps up here around the Chesapeake Bay about 5 o'clock. Here's part number 2, moving through Raleigh and down into places like Georgetown, South Carolina, around 5 o'clock. So we're keeping an eye on kind of both of these lines here right on through the early evening hours. This is about 7 o'clock and then 8 o'clock. And maybe we see an isolated strong wind gust even up into the Catskills and Poconos region here. So keep an eye on that. This rain isn't going to be a lot for Eastern North Carolina. I don't think it's going to put out that wildfire. If we see any lightning, that's actually going to aggravate things. But it certainly is going to be needed to help with the longer term drought status that we're in some places in the southeast. But after this moves through, we're just looking at kind of a rainy night over the northeast. And then most of that rain doesn't really even make its way into New England until about daybreak tomorrow. So Sunday should be a pretty wet day across New England here. I wanted to zoom down and show you guys Florida real quick as well. Let me see if I have that here. Just do local. And Florida is going to see some unsettled weather as well today. We see scattered showers and storms popping up in the Tampa Bay area early this afternoon, but really the more intense storms are going to be around Miami this afternoon, 4 and 5 o'clock again, and up the East Coast near Jacksonville. We could see some hail and some locally strong wind in here, but not really a big tornado threat. That risk continues into this evening and really even into the overnight, a few leftover showers, and then things move offshore. And as this front moves through tomorrow morning, we'll actually see somewhat of relief coming from the humidity and a pretty quiet day across Florida tomorrow, maybe some showers moving into the panhandle overnight tomorrow night. Here's a closer look at the rest of the southeast so you guys can see that. And here's our storm system moving through today, the Carolinas. Georgia's not really going to see a whole lot, maybe right on the coast. But really, it's a pretty, the front will be notice for sure. It's going to turn less humid and cooler, but it's not going to bring us a whole lot of bang for its buck. We're not going to see a whole lot of severe weather out of this. The next storm system in Texas, we'll keep an eye on as that sneaks some moisture into parts of the south, but I'm actually going to kind of talk more about that here in a couple of slides later. In Texas, though, you'll see storms are going to blow up this afternoon. This is 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, so we do have that risk for intense storms, and they'll move east-southeastward towards Round Rock, Georgetown, and Austin here around 8, 9, 10 o'clock tonight. So definitely be prepared for some pretty big hail in this region. And then additional storms kind of continuing off to the south and east towards San Antonio later tonight. If you're farther north and east of this area of potential severe weather, you're just looking at some rain and maybe embedded thunderstorms. So for those of you heading to church in Texas tomorrow, prepare for kind of a wet, cool start, especially around the Metroplex, Abilene, even Lubbock, Texas. It's going to be kind of a chilly day on Sunday. Just kind of wet, just soggy, not really a nice day to take the kids out to the park in the afternoon. So be prepared for that. And then that lighter rain moves eastward into Louisiana. Shouldn't bring any severe weather at this point, but we may see some rumbles of thunder across southeast Texas tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night. Here's a look at the big picture. This is the GFS model. You can see our East Coast storm here moving up into Canada. It's running into a high pressure block, so very warm and dry across Quebec until you get down to about Montreal. But you'll see right behind it, it turns a lot colder, and we'll have snow showers through the weekend, really scattered snow showers across the UP of Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Some flakes could even mix in Monday morning over western New York and western PA, maybe even the higher elevations of northern West Virginia. But overall, this big high settles in, and it's just a kind of a cool week here coming up. New England's going to be damp here. Eastern Canada is going to be damp here the first part of next week. But notice we'll see some snow over the Denver region and some chilly rain across Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And a lot of these spots really do need that rain. So we may see more rain here out of this system than we've seen in a couple of months, to be honest. But really no organized severe weather threat. Just going to be wet, some scattered thunderstorms on the southern part of this storm, but multiple low pressure waves coming through the southeast. Wednesday looks like it's going to be cool and wet for Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and southern Virginia. We may not even get out of the 50s in many places, kind of a wedge of cool air. And then after that leaves here, another one moves through Texas on Thursday. Maybe this one has a better chance of some severe weather towards the Gulf Coast, but again, it's probably just going to be wet with embedded thunderstorms. And then this low pressure wave heads towards the southeast once again. And we could have a very wet end to next week or start to next weekend in the southeast once again, as this low pressure spins across eastern North Carolina and then moves out to sea. And the cool weather continues right on through Sunday before things start to warm up in the southeast here a little bit here as we start May, but still below average temperatures for certain. The West is quieter, though. Here's a look at the European model, and you can see, aside from a system diving down into the Rockies, it's actually going to be a pretty quiet week in the Western U.S. Really, all the fun is going to be down south and in the southern Rockies and high plains. Maybe some heavy rain over eastern New Mexico. We could use that for sure. But the southeast is wet Wednesday night. We get a little bit of a break. The next storm comes in here. The European is slower than the GFS. It actually has Saturday being pretty wet across the Mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas. We'll have to see how this northern branch feature winds through, but it could be pretty chilly and nasty here next weekend across the Great Lakes region, maybe even a few thunderstorms across the Ohio Valley as this moves through. But nonetheless, prepare for cooler weather and don't put the jackets away. Here's our temperature anomalies, and you can see this is early next week, and we're below the average, and the cold kind of recycles itself here next weekend. So aside from Florida and the West Coast, much of the U.S. will be well below average, with it feeling more like late March and early April than, say, May as we head in that direction. But we should start to see some warming coming as we get into the first full weekend of May. And here's a look at those temperatures real quick before we kind of wrap things up here. And you can see definitely that cooler weather comes down. We'll see a lot of 30s, 40s, and 50s across about 2/3 of the country here. Even Texas will be kind of cool, and then it starts warming back up in deep South Texas and Florida. But really, all of our warmth is going to be in the West. We're looking at 80s and 90s in the Southwest, 60s and 70s on the West Coast. And how about 82 degrees in Portland, Oregon here next weekend? That certainly is possible. 90 in Vegas. You certainly have earned that after the winter we went through. You'll see the rainfall as well is going to be pretty heavy across the east in this first storm. And then our next storm system will produce some heavy rain over the south central U.S. into the southeast and Florida. We may see a lot of places by next weekend in Florida getting between 3 and 6 inches of rain. And deep South Texas could see 1 to 3 with localized 5 to 6 inch totals, a couple of inches as well in Northeast Texas. But this area in here really needs that rain. And the GFS model says some places can have over 1 inch of rain in this region, maybe even 2 to 3 inches in eastern Colorado. So that would be somewhat welcome as it's been so dry. But nonetheless, cool and wet as we wrap up the month of April here. So thank you so much for your time today. I'll give you guys updates on my community page and on my Facebook page with any severe weather that gets organized here later today. So be prepared for that. I know it's going to interrupt a lot of your outdoor festivities, but it's probably only going to rain for many of us for just a few hours today. So if you could subscribe to my channel and share with your friends, I very much appreciate that. And today is Earth Day, and as a believer, as a Christian, as a believer, I believe that we've been summoned here to take care of the earth. I've been called to share weather safety with everybody, but I also read the Bible every day and wanted to share a quick passage with you. That's Genesis 2:15. That's right, going back to the creation of the earth. The Lord God placed the man in the Garden of Eden to tend and watch over it. We have been put here on earth for just a short amount of time, relatively speaking, 60, 70, 80, 90 years, compared to the fact that the earth is probably maybe 10,000 years old since God created it. I've heard people say millions. There's no evidence to really support that, but I know people say that. But look, God created the earth. He created the heavens and the earth. He did not stick us here to sit there and waste away at it. He put us here to take care of the earth. And I commission you, if you could do something to take care of the earth, then you're fulfilling the promises of God to take care of us eternally as Christians. And if you're not a Christian believer, I'm not going to bash you over the face with the Bible. That's not why I do what I do. In fact, I was not a believer for 30 years, but I think we all learned growing up that we need to take care of the earth and do a better job with it, be good stewards of the earth. And I just wanted to share that with you here on Earth Day because, we only have so much time to make an impact on the lives of others, and taking care of the earth is how we take care of our children and many of the generations that will follow. So thank you all so much for your time today. If you have any prayer requests, I would love to pray over them and pray for you. Please feel free to list those, and I hope you all have a blessed weekend. Look forward to seeing you again on Monday morning. Make it a good one. Take care.